Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. My name is Daniel Rosenthal. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the Shed for the first of our National Theatre 50 National Histories. My guests are Nancy Carroll and Alex Jennings. Just to let you know that we have microphones on, but they're just for the recording, for audio and film, so we're not amplified, but we will project as best we can. So the premise of these National Theatre Histories is it's not exactly Desert Island Discs, but Nancy and Alex have both been sent 10 questions, which we hope will sum up their experiences of the National as member of the audience and as actors. So that's the format. I will take us through their questions and they will elaborate on answers that we hope they thought a little bit about in advance. They've had the questions in advance and I've had a sneak peek at the answers, but no more than a sneak peek. So we will begin with what was your first encounter with the National Theatre? Nancy.
My first encounter, well, I grew up in southeast London, so we used to go over Waterloo Bridge all the time as kids in the back of the car. And I think I had a sort of instinct about the building from an early stage. And because, you know, in that sort of ridiculously precocious way that sometimes kids are, I want to go on the stage. It just meant a lot, and it was always sort of beaming, and whenever we got to go, I think the first thing I ever went to see was Guys and Dolls with Bob Hoskins. My grandparents took me to go and see, and it was just overwhelmingly brilliant, and I had this instinct of wanting to be up there and not in the auditorium, and from that moment on, it just was a sort of mecca, really, and continues to be. So.
And when you saw Guys and Dolls, had you started acting at school? Had you been to a lot of theatre?
Yeah, I think I was doing things on the stage from about the age of 3, which is just really obnoxious, really. But my mum would say that not without her help, because I think I did a tap show at Brixton Town Hall when I was 3 years old, and then absolutely refused to go on without her. So she stood just behind the main curtain and did the entire dance with me, and she's sort of been metaphorically there ever since. So, yeah.
Okay. Alex, your first encounter with the National?
Well, being considerably older than Nancy, my first encounter was at the Old Vic. When I get sort of 1970, I wrote it down, didn't I?
72, 73, we think.
Yeah, 72, 73, when I was kind of 15, 16, and I kind of got the acting bug at school and would travel up to London on my own with friends or with my parents sometimes, but mostly I think I probably went on my own and stood at the back at the Old Vic. And saw a lot there. I can't remember exactly what the first production I saw was. I think it was either Jumpers or The Misanthrope, I think, or Equus, one of those. And was completely enraptured by the whole experience and did dream, I suppose, that one day, but never. I don't know, I must have thought I might get there one day, but was completely starstruck and stage-struck and just loved the whole thing.
I'll come back to those first shows of yours in a minute, but Nancy, Guys and Dolls, it's an extraordinary store of memories for everybody who saw it, but if we were word associating Guys and Dolls, other than Bob Hoskins, take us into a bit more detail of what you remember from that performance.
Just mesmeric. Just the fact that I think I'd been taken to quite commercial things up until that point. But the fact that for the first time, I can't even remember which theatre I saw it in. It must have been the Olivier. Yeah. The nature of spaces unfolding in the way that only the Olivier can, and sort of, you know, sets disappearing and other ones coming up, and just for me, it was the first theatrical coup that I'd ever been to, because I think everything up until that point had either been children's theatre or very commercial, sort of formulaic. And suddenly there were people sort of, you know, coming out of the ground singing and others disappearing, and it was just this, just blown away, and you lose a sense of yourself and disappear into this other world, and And I think that's what continues to excite me about everything to do with theatre is the magic, that you can properly create magic on these stages where, you know, people can whip off bits of costume and become something else. I can remember seeing Tony Sher in Travesties and being an old man and then sort of becoming a younger version and whipping off the trousers and being this younger man. And it's just that, really, that something can change before you that would have taken weeks to work out. But as an audience member, it's in a split second and you're totally taken to another world. And that's what I remember, that happening in front of me, thinking, you know, just amazing, yeah.
Alex, jumpers, misanthrope, Equus, you've got quite an extraordinary range of people. You've got Michael Hordern, you've got Alec McCowan, you've got Diana Rigg.
Yeah.
What are the headline memories, as it were, from those?
A lot of Diana Rigg then, and then you know, and then getting to work with some of these people, which is just amazing. You know, later on, Michael Hordern in Jumpers, and then again here in The Rivals, just consummate comic actor, and more than, you know, actually, comedy's hard, isn't it? Tragedy's easy. That thing. So I was going to say more than that, but you know, amazing actor. And the intellectual wizardry of the play of Jumpers and was fantastically stimulating. Him standing on a tortoise, chuntering away. Brilliant performance.
And Equus, what do you remember most about
Equus,
that?
I remember Alec McCowan and seeing people spinning words and. Those two guys here and John Wood, I guess, John Wood and Ian Richardson and Paul Schofield, who is my complete hero, were being exposed to their wizardry was a huge thing for me then.
And by that point, you were thinking about the stage. Had you started acting at school?
I started acting at school. Particular teacher who was I was made to do economics because I was so useless at maths, and then failed economics as well. Hence the fact that I've been living on an overdraft for the last 30 years. Sorry, Dad. What was I saying?
Starting acting.
Yeah, starting out as a particular teacher who ran a drama club at school, and then that knocked on into local youth theatres and then National Youth Theatre. And it became my that was all I wanted to do. And fantastic. My big regret, I think we come to it later, is that I never saw Olivier, but I saw all the others of that extraordinary generation.
Great. Okay, so we come to question 2, which is, who is your unsung hero, or who are your unsung heroes of the National? On stage, backstage, in an office, or elsewhere? Nancy.
I think I basically said everybody that isn't an actor, really. Well, I mean, it's a rather big general sweep, but it is true that this, my husband, who's also an actor, talks a lot about trusting the process. And it's completely true that, you know, you bring all the energy of your day and what's going on at home with you into work. But there's literally this path that you take once you enter stage door, and then you go upstairs to get some food, and then you go and get your hair done, and then you might have a sort of fight call or a music call on stage, and all these people that make those things work, and all the backstage people and all the ushers and everybody that sort of make this building happen and so welcoming and warm, and that all of that energy combines to make this sort of throbbing hive of activity and brilliance, and they're the heroes, really. They you know, so much of all the struggles that you have in a rehearsal room when you're in your sort of jeans and trainers and everything else, and you put on a beautifully made pair of shoes or a fantastically coiffured wig, and then suddenly you go, oh, hang on, oh, I can do this, you know, and it is true that suddenly you think, oh, there we are. I thought, you know, and it is that we go on stage and do our thing, but you know, it's no mean feat in as much as we do it and we make a lot of fuss about ourselves and aren't we marvellous, but actually, you know, all these brilliant people put us there, quite literally, and they are the heroes, really, because they understand so much about the eccentricities, and they are absolutely the best of the best, everybody who works in this building. And they don't get the big applause, so, you know, we go, oh, thank you so much, really nothing. But actually they're doing so much of the work, and so them, really.
And it strikes me that that applies with workshops as well. That
Yeah.
Presumably there is a moment the first time with a dress rehearsal or in tech when you've had that costume moment, but then if it's a good and the right kind of set, and suddenly the performance is lifted,
Yeah.
one imagines, by the set. Do you think that's true, Alex?
Yes, I think it is, and absolutely it is. And that's a whole other element that comes in. One of the luxuries of working here is that you're often working on a kind of plywood version of the set that you're going to be on. But the shoes, the hair, the door that you're opening, all helps your imagination enormously.
You also mentioned, Alex, Linda on the stage door.
Linda on the stage
So
door.
you need to tell us more about Linda.
Well, Linda on the stage door has been Linda on the stage door for as long as I've been coming here. I don't know when she started. And her face and her presence there is such a kind of important thing, I think, for all the actors who work here. The others are great as well, but Linda on the stage door.
Yeah.
She doesn't take any nonsense. She treats everybody the same. You can't mess with her, but she's a completely welcoming and all-embracing presence. And it's a really important, hugely important role that she plays. Having just done the 2 Alan Bennett short plays that I did here, we took over to the Duchess Theatre, and it's a long time since I've done a gig in the West End. And we had sort of 3 or 4 different stage door people manning the stage door a week, and so you never kind of knew who they were, and so never sort of built up a relationship.
So the notion of this place as home from home when you're in a show is partly
Yeah.
down to Linda.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it is, and other people as well, of course. And I mentioned Ralph, the dresser, who's just one of the dressers. But when you have a relationship with a dresser who doesn't take any nonsense from you
Yeah.
and calms you down, and you also get really, or I get really paranoid, because the dressers come in and watch a late run through of the show before you go into the theatre in the rehearsal room, and sometimes they don't say anything to you. They don't say a word, and that's always a slightly rocky moment.
Nancy, you also mentioned stage management. I think it'd be very interesting to hear from both of you a little bit about their role after the press night, once the show is up and running and keeping it running, coming in and out of repertoire here, and what you see, if it's possible to sum up their role from a company's point of view.
Well, it's just everything. They make it all work. And also there's so much adrenaline that charges through you, depending on the performance that you're doing. To have people who are completely steady, completely calm, and know exactly what's happening is more than invaluable. And invariably, if you're waiting in a tight, dark space to go on into a particular entrance or a particular moment, how that person is it, you know, whether they look you in the eye and smile or talk to you, or if you're feeling a bit weepy or you can't do it or you're shaking or whatever it is that you're feeling just before you open the door and go on, that person who stood with you in the dark, if they are calm and steady and completely solid, and you know that they're totally with you and have been with you since day one, it's just everything. It's sort of, you can't really describe it. They're so amazing, and again, you know, dealing with all of us and sort of, oh God, it's just, you know, and but actually they're brilliant, and they know so much, and they just sort of maneuver and sort of hand you things just as you go on, and they just make, there aren't, I can't think of enough adjectives really to describe how brilliant they are.
And their role in a rehearsal room and what they have to deal with volatile egos,
Personalities.
directors.
And you've enacted this for us, because in The Habit of Art, in Alan Bennett's play, the scenario is the rehearsal of a play here at the National, and Francis de la Tour playing Kay, the stage manager who has to take over. So you can discreetly...
Stage manager in G. Muir.
You can discreetly tell us how accurate a portrayal of the stage manager's role that is, because it's fictional.
I think it was, you know, it's in that play, it's Alan Bennett's rather glamorous version of stage management. Not that stage management can't be glamorous, but it's a literary comic version. But the relationship of trust is pretty accurate, I think, in that play.
Okay, so we move from the unsung heroes to question 3, which is which individual performance by an actor has left the most lasting impression on you? Which performance by a National Theatre actor? Nancy, you've given us a very long list.
I did, I'm so
So
sorry.
I will, if I may, single out just a few, and I will start with one which was an ensemble performance, which is Chips with Everything, which is Howard Davies' revival of Arnold Wesker's play about national service. So tell us a little bit about why that stands out.
It wasn't so much the individual performance. Again, it was one of those things that you take away certain lasting images, and it was actually to do with the ensemble working as a whole, and sort of every time you see a performance that has an element that creates something that's so delicate and but you sort of get this sort of visceral quality of what it is that things should, how ensembles should work, and the seamlessness of it, and actually that, you know, it's very interesting, the process of putting on a play, and then you rehearse it and you tech it and you preview it, and then suddenly you have press night, and you get all these people that come along with their pad and pencil, and they take it apart, and they say, oh, so-and-so was quite good, and so-and-so looked very nice in that dress, and so-and-so looked, and suddenly it becomes this thing that you can take apart, which is fine, and it's part of the process, and we've, you know, you come to recognise it and get used to it. But actually, I remember somebody, a director saying to me that the best performances are when you can't take any single performance out, because it's so seamless as a whole that you're sort of there. It works as one, and actually I think Chips with Everything was one of the first shows I remember walking away thinking. I remember that wonderful scene where they were with the opening and the shutting of the gates. They're trying to.
They raid a Coke stall.
That's right, and it was like a sort of ballet. And the, you know,
it got around at the end of it. It got around.
It was just a beautiful sort of thing. It was like a sort of science. And again, you know, having been in rehearsal rooms where those sorts of things are created, it must have been a nightmare to create, and they must have done it again and again and again. But by the time it was on the stage, it was just this dance, and that you just get transported with it, and you don't walk away. I mean, you always walk away saying so-and-so was absolutely brilliant, but actually what you take away with you is the entire performance.
Like that team in the kitchen.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, just
it's striking that it should both be Wesker.
Yeah. But I think that for me, and in terms of, you know, whether you're in the business or not, I think that, you know, there are things that just stay with you, and you know that they've enriched you in some way, and I think that was one of the many plays that I've seen that you feel that somehow is a piece of information about how you want to be, and the sort of performances you want to be in, and that was,
So from an ensemble to an individual, Rory Kinnear as Sir Fopling Flutter in The Man of Mode, which is 2007 in the Olivier.
Yeah, it was just a thing of beauty, really. I don't know if you guys saw it, but it was. There are certain performances that I've done over the years where there will be moments in the show when I'm not on stage, but I will always make sure that I'm in the wings to see a particular thing, because it's so beautiful, you just don't want to miss it. And Rory as Sir Fopling, well, pretty much every time he came on, but there was there was a bit in the show where he performs on the piano, and Rory's a brilliant musician, but he did a sort of version of Coldplay where he played, and he did this whole thing, and it was you know, he had drums and string, but it was him talking Dorrimont and the other guys through this performance, and it was just sublime, and I watched it every single night, and it was wonderful. I didn't dare miss it. It was, anyway.
Alex, yours is Ralph Richardson as John Gabriel Borkman. So 1975 at the Old Vic, and then for a few performances here.
Yeah, saw it there and here. I mean, he was such a... I mean, people always you know, do talk about him being sort of the eccentricity and the slight madness of him, which I was completely blown away by in that. And it was a wonderful production. Peter Hall, incredible cast, Peggy Ashcroft, Wendy Hiller. But his sort of connection with the wildness of that play and the madness of it, can't think how else to put it. And I'll never forget the moment the set swung round and he climbed out onto the glacier at the end, and it swung round, and so as it swung around, he was coming up onto this higher level, and he dies in the snow, I think, at the end, doesn't he? A hand of something about iron ore, hand of iron ore. Complete magician, I think, and eccentricity. Cheryl Campbell who was in it, told me a story about them rehearsing it, and he used to have a motorbike, as you probably all know, and also a parrot and a ferret. And Peggy Ashcroft had left her cardigan behind in the rehearsal room, and Cheryl pointed out that is that Peggy's cardigan? He said, "All right, it's all right, I'll drop it off," and took off his motorbike jacket and his jacket, put on Peggy Ashcroft's cardigan underneath all his motorbike gear, and off he went.
Oh dear.
And I also saw him in Gielgud twice as well, in No Man's Land, which was pretty extraordinary.
Is Borkman a part you'd like to play?
Oh, God. Yeah, probably. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it. Yeah, not yet, but yes.
Eventually. Okay, we move on to question 4. What is the most fulfilling production at the National that you have been part of? Nancy, you've put down 2, Voisey and After the Dance.
Yeah, the Voisey Inheritance, which is a brilliant Harley Granville Barker play. And I've always been a massive fan of his, and this was the first... It was just brilliant from the off, because it's one of those terrible things that often you go for an audition, and if you really want it, you're bound not to get it. And that actually, if you turn up slightly hungover and not really giving a monkeys, they'll give it to you. I mean, it sounds very extreme, but it was one of those things that I played a character called Alice Maitland, and she was just the most wonderful character to play, just really strong meat and very funny, and Peter Gill directed it, and it's quite an interesting thing, because Peter's decided over many years of directing that the best way to direct actors is to tell them how to say their lines, which doesn't always go down brilliantly. But he is actually so completely off, you know, he's right quite a lot of the time. Although the danger is that you block the process of trying to sort of work out how you feel about it and all the rest of it. But ultimately he can hear the whole thing in his head, and so he's very, very clear about what he wants. But it was just it was a great show to be part of, and Alison Chitty designed it, and it was just lovely, and it had a flow to it, and it introduced me to Barker, and that as an actor and a director, he's just incredibly exciting. He's one of those things that when writers write brilliantly, the lines are far easier to learn, and it just sort of flows through you. Like at its best, you can completely leave yourself alone, and it just sort of happens because he knows his stuff. And he wrote a series of prefaces to Shakespeare that, again, if you're about to do a Shakespeare play and you read the preface, you just he opens it up to you in a completely unscary, unelitist way. It's just like this is the way to do it because he's done it, you know. And the National Theatre was really his idea. I mean,
he's one of the founding fathers.
Yeah,
certainly.
and he puts pieces of furniture bang in the middle of the stage so that actors can't take centre stage and go, ha-ha, here I am. He makes them maneuver around a live space and negotiate people and furniture and things to make it real and force people to interact in the most beautiful way. And it was just an incredibly happy company, and I shared a dressing room with 3 extraordinary women and who are all still very good, very close friends. So that was one experience. And then the other one was After the Dance, which I did with Thea Sharrock here a couple of years ago. And it, again, just an incredibly happy company. And it always helps when you're in a production that has a level of success, because you know, because audiences want to be there, and it had an excitement about it because people wanted to be there. But again, it's to do, for me, it's not so much individual performances, but about the space between actors, that is that chemistry, and that if you can sort of set light to something between you, and at its best, it's sort of overwhelmingly fiery, I suppose, to continue the metaphor. And it was just a lovely, lovely show to be part of, and it was a Rattigan play that people didn't know about, and it was that wonderful, magical thing of people sitting back at the beginning of the first half thinking, oh, it's great, really funny, witty drawing room comedy, and actually it descends into this emotional car crash. So again, it's about keeping audiences on their toes and not allowing them to get ahead of you, but also granting the audience with an intelligence, so that you, as a whole, as an audience and a cast, go through something entirely in that space of the theatre, and for me, it doesn't really get much better.
Because it's not such a well-known play, just sketch for us who you were playing and the relationships and why it becomes so harrowing in the second half.
I played a woman called Joan Scott Fowler, who's married to a man called David Scott Fowler, and they belong to a sort of a generation that was very quickly going to die out with the Second World War, and having had the First World War, there was a younger generation who were affected intellectually, psychologically, in a way that they didn't know how this older generation could continue to exist, having been through that war. And so you have these, we're very, very well-to-do. We live in this very posh 1930s flat, and we drink from morning till night. And our life exists on this sort of alcoholic haze, really. And basically, we've been in this marriage and had these continuous parties for about 12 years. And it's all like, oh, God, darling, it's wonderful. But actually, the secret that she harbours is that she desperately loves her husband. But they've never really discussed it. You know, getting married was a marvellous thing to do, and they just continued to be married until it became inconvenient. But actually, at the point at which this younger woman decides that she wants to have him, and he begins to pull away, this sort of drunk party woman realizes she's messed up and that she's made this terrible mistake. And so there's this sort of huge fallout because she's missed the opportunity. It's gone, everything in her, and everything's crumbling around her. And just as everything's crumbling and all the truth is about to come out, they have this enormous party, and so all the lids are put back on. So the audience are sort of party to this heart-wrenching sadness, and then they witness everybody covering it up again, and never to be, I don't know what the word is, made better. And that results in her wanting not to live anymore, and so she kills herself. Sorry, I've just given that away. If anybody's about to
Spoiler
going
alert,
to see,
too late, I'm
yeah,
afraid.
So she kills herself because she doesn't know how to continue without him, and so then the second half is how they carry on in that aftermath, really, and yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful.
It is a
play.
show an awful lot of people wish they'd been able to see because the run was not as long as people wanted it to be.
No.
Alex, you've chosen two also. Firstly, The Winter's Tale. So the Olivier in 2001, Leontes
Thank you for reminding me.
for Nicholas Heitner.
Yeah, Nick, I've worked a lot with Nick. When we came to do Winter's Tale, he got a cast together for the court folk, the royals and their entourages, of people, a bunch of us who'd all done a lot of work together previously in one combination or another, were at particular points in our lives, myself and Julian Wadden particularly, with young kids. Obviously that's a theme in the play. It was very kind of astutely cast, I think. And I'm never happier than doing Shakespeare in jeans and shirts rather than tights and blouses. I couldn't do that. It releases my kind of energy, really, I think, and my imaginative energy, and I completely bought into Nick's version of the play. For those of you who didn't see it, when they go to Bohemia, is it, in that big middle act? That was like Glastonbury. Phil Daniels had a rap song that was written in the rehearsal rooms, which really pissed some people off. I thought it was just genius. And I stood in the wings and watched it every single performance. It was a thing of huge joy. I think Nick just got the play and kind of made us get it as well. And I felt like I understood that man's emotional journey, I think.
Is it a strange play to be in terms of the arc, because it's so extraordinarily intense, and then you disappear for an hour or thereabouts?
But it's almost like three different. The final act is almost like a separate play in some ways. I think it's such an extraordinary play because it's so wild, and there's a statue that comes alive at the end. Oh, she's warm is one of the most extraordinary lines he wrote, I think. And the jealousy at the beginning, which I'm not saying I didn't have a problem with it, but you just have to that people try to sort of explain it. You have to kind of just leap in, and Shakespeare writes, where does the jealousy come from? He writes it for you. Those speeches of Leontes are all broken up and jagged, and it's all there in the way he's written it, and you just have to sort of jump in, as I say.
And we go to a different extreme, which is playing Higgins in My Fair Lady, Trevor Nunn's production, when it moved from here to, it had moved to Drury Lane.
Yeah, so not strictly. Well, yeah, it was a National Theatre production. I'd never done a takeover before. Trevor Nunn came to me and said, would you be interested? Yes, I'd be interested. And Trevor and the camera Macintosh machine put me with a singing guy just to see whether it was a goer. I wanted to do that as well, because I'd never done a musical before. And it was kind of the happiest sort of event I've ever been involved with. And I could go on playing that part forever. And indeed, we'll be playing it again this Christmas in Paris, in a different production. It was such a terrifying experience taking over from somebody, because the bus is already moving, We had Malcolm Sinclair was my Colonel Pickering, and so there were quite a few of us who were joining, were new to it. Joe Riding was already in it. We had a kind of one run through, I think, on the Friday, bit of a rehearsal on the Saturday. Jonathan was still playing it. Jonathan finished on Saturday night, and you're on Monday. And the machine is already kind of up and throbbing and going, and you haven't gone through. You've had a proper rehearsal period, but you haven't gone through the creative process that produced the thing that it was to start with, if you know what I mean. So that was the single most terrifying thing I've ever done. But just getting through, I played it like Ethel Merman, the first, Drury Lane, because I didn't know about kind of head mics and all of that, and the fact that you can actually not sing very loud. I just thought I had to fill Drury Lane. And you know, it's such a perfect piece of, the source material is so brilliant, the songs come out of the action and move the action forward. It was a dream job. Dennis Waterman came round to us in the end as well.
We will have
Took
to
a while.
hustle through the remaining questions, unfortunately, because time is defeating us. Which national production or performance did you miss that you really wish you'd been able to see? Nancy.
What did I say?
You said Ghetto, Fuente of Ayuna, The Loft Season, and Richardson, Olivier, and Ashcroft in anything.
Yeah, I mean, quite a lot of those are to do with my husband as well, because there's a lot that I've heard him talk about over the years. His experiences early on with Ghetto and with Fuente, and so that I...
Appearing in them.
Appearing in them. He did it twice. He did it the first time, and then when it went to Spain. And I think it's just that I've heard so much about them, and they sound so magical that I just wish I'd seen them. And Ghetto particularly sounded extraordinary.
Which Alex was in.
Which you were in. And which I've heard. He had this little tape that he played to me early on with Maria singing and all you guys singing. And he just sobbed his way through it, just remembering it and how magical it was. And described at great length the moment with the bread and the jam. You feed them the bread, and because you were playing the Nazi.
I was the Nazi, yeah.
There were other Nazis, but you were the central Nazi.
Yes.
It's a play within you performing. The Jews within the camp are performing.
Performing a play, yeah.
And that you are feeding them the bread and the jam as a congratulations for what they performed.
Yeah.
But as they tear into this bread, they're surrounded by soldiers who then completely kill them to smithereens. So, but the thing that Joe has described at great length is this extraordinary moment, because of course you've got this bread and jam, and then suddenly all these guys are sort of throwing themselves right. So the bread and the jam goes into the air, and it looks like flesh. And then everybody's down, and slowly they start singing and bringing them. I can't remember what was the song.
I can't remember.
Na 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 na.
It's something like we will live on. Something
Na 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 na.
Yeah.
Na 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 na. And just this idea that everybody's absolutely obliterated, having performed for their life, and that slowly, each of these bodies stands up in defiance. And I feel like I was there, but it just, sounds amazing, really.
It was.
Yeah. So I wish I'd seen that. It makes me cry just thinking about it. And what else did I say?
Fuente of Ayuna and The Loft Season, but we're probably going to have to let Alex.
Yes, Alex. Alex is going.
Unfortunately, Alex, Long Day's Journey. With
Olivier in Long Day's Journey and Tonight, which I didn't see.
Did you see the film, the television?
Well, to be perfectly honest, no, I haven't seen it. And I started to watch it in the not that long ago, but I was on holiday in the south of France, and it didn't sort of, thought, oh no. but I will go back to it. But yeah, that I regret, because I could have seen it, but I didn't.
Okay, we whisk our way through. Your fancy dress party. Which NT costume would you wear, Nancy?
I said something from It wasn't a very interesting response. I think I said one of my costumes from Voisey, because it was quite late at night when I was writing the answers. They were just lovely, and I had a massive yellow frock that I wore at the end when I got to finally agree to marry Edward Voisey, who is Dominic West. And I remember just sort of careering around the stage and sort of, I can't remember what the line was, something like, he says, you know, I'm not a man. I said, you're a man. Yes, you are. You're a man, and I love you with all my heart. And it was just such a great frock to sort of sweep around the stage, because it was sort of canary yellow and massive. So yeah, that was quite good. That's what I remember. So I quite
Alex, yours is the relapse.
Yes, mine's a frock as well, really, isn't it? Yeah, it was when I played Lord Foppington in the relapse here, and Sue Blaine, brilliant costume designer, brought me in quite early to be very involved in Lord Foppington's costumes, which was great because he's a man who is very obsessed with what he wears, and so I was able to. She included me in choosing the fabrics, and there was one particular costume that I wore as Lord Foppington when Lord Foppington goes to the country. And it was this amazing creation, or it was kind of green and pink. The tights were pink. You can wear tights in comedy. The tights were pink. And I had a series of kind of ever increasing wigs in size. And it was a primarily green costume, but it was embroidered. It was covered in three-dimensional roses. The gloves matched. The bag matched, so that's my fancy dress costume. It was a work of art. They all were, and they should be in a museum. I think they're in the costume department in the costume store in Clapham or wherever it is, and amateurs are allowed to use them.
So, we are going to have to whisk through, otherwise stage management will not be very happy with us. So, last question is, what is your favourite, perhaps secret spot in the National Theatre? Nancy?
I think I said the quad, didn't I? All the windows of the dressing rooms face each other into this sort of glazed quad. And there's just this wonderful moment at the first preview and press night and last show, when they called beginners, when the stage management called beginners, all the actors from all three theatres come to the windows and bang the windows, and it's just wonderful. It's like a sort of cry to war.
Yeah, it's
but it's a sort of really amazing solidarity of the sort of madness that we're about to sort of do, and
it's been going on for a while, but it's not. It's a relatively recent tradition.
Is it?
Yeah, it's
right,
been.
okay.
It's certainly happened since I've been here, but it's just fantastic, and happens on last nights as well. Doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's wonderful. So that, and I have a particular favourite toilet in the foyer that I always go to before a meeting. So that was it.
Alex, you didn't put an answer down. Would you go along with the quad?
Yeah, I would go along with the quad. Absolutely, yeah.
So we're going to have to finish off with the final bit of fantasy programming. The National very occasionally does all-day marathons. You can come in the morning and you see 3 plays and you leave late at night. And that was what Alex and Nancy were offered. Do you remember your choices, or would you like me to?
I remember my choice.
Okay, Alex, morning, matinee, evening.
I'd see Noel Coward's 1964 production of his own play, Hay Fever, with Edith Evans, Maggie Smith, Robert Stevens, Derek Jacobi, Lynn Redgrave. I'm a bit of a nerd. Yeah, I'd see that. Extraordinary cast. Lynn Redgrave. And then quite a long matinee, long day's journey into night. And then my evening show would be Nick's production of Carousel.
Okay.
For reasons that will make me cry. So.
Nancy.
What did I say?
You said
I've got my glasses.
Guys and Dolls.
Oh, Guys and Dolls, revisiting my first experience here. Ian Charleson as Hamlet.
Which you saw or didn't?
I didn't see. I wish I'd seen. After Daniel Day-Lewis had left, and Ian Charleson was at the end of his life. And I heard so many people talk about it, including John Peter, who talks about it incredibly movingly, because he was very, very ill. And he apparently agreed to do it, sort of having thought that he couldn't get through it. He then mustered the energy to come and do it, and people who saw it said that it was absolutely extraordinary, and that the words took on a completely different meaning because there was a man facing death, and so to be or not to be was just on another stratosphere of beautifulness, really, and poetry. So I wish I'd seen that.
And it's the reason we have the Ian Charleson Awards for young actors, because John Peter, the drama critic, saw it, and it was a commemoration of Ian Charleson as a result of that.
Yes, and I think what I'd heard was that Ian Charleson was very upset that he hadn't reviewed it, or that he hadn't made some direct comment, and then actually the next day John Peter came round with this bottle of champagne and was sort of in tears.
And your last is a much less well-known, which is Shadow of a Boy.
Shadow of a Boy, again, because my husband is terrible, such a sort of soppy old tart. Again, the Loft season was something that happened about 10 years ago in the foyer, that they created a whole series of new spaces, and extraordinary work went on, and young directors were given opportunities to use spaces in very interesting ways, and you know, direct the work of writers who were suddenly being championed because of this opportunity. And Joe did a play in which he played a Welsh spaceman in an orange and purple motorbike suit, and did extraordinary things with whistling, where he was able to take a calculator and a window scraper held together with rubber bands, and because he's got this extraordinary whistling where he can whistle two sounds at the same time, he was able to create this outer space machine that was able to assess what it was that he was looking at, having come from outer space onto the Earth. So I wish I'd seen that, and I would love to have that as my ultimate evening performance.
And so you shall.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's where we'll leave it. Thank you very much for coming. Our thanks to Nancy and Alex.